Welcome to our conversation this morning, everyone. We are going to be talking today about the transformative power of unrestricted funding towards cultural freedom. And so the structure of our conversation today is going to go like this. We're going to spend the first 30 minutes showcasing the three artists that we've invited to come and share their stories, and then also a longtime partner of the fund. But first, before we get into all of that, I would like to please introduce Debbie van der Velde, who is the ambassador for the International Cultural Cooperation for the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Debbie.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. And indeed, good morning to everyone, and good afternoon for those in Europe. And a warm welcome to everyone on this first day of the 6th African Union EU Summit. And my name is Davy, as you mentioned, and I'm the Netherlands Ambassador for International Cultural Cooperation. I'm really happy that this summit between states starts off with a few days in which we highlight connections we make with each other as societies and as humans. It's a pleasure to open this side event called the Transformative Power of Unrestricted Funding Towards Cultural Freedom, hosted by the Prins Klaus Fund. And indeed, the Prins Klaus Fund is an important long-term partner in implementing our Dutch international cultural policy, and are doing such an amazing job. One of our objectives is to support creative initiatives that offer solutions to global challenges and help us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to share an example with you, which I find very telling. It's a Mexican artist. His name is Gilberto Esparza, and he was indeed supported also by the Prins Klaus Fund. And he invented a specific technique to reconstruct coral reefs and to stimulate their growth again. We believe that art is an important vehicle to achieve social change, and artists play a role in creating awareness about the urgency of this change by offering people experiences and insights that have more impact than words. Creatives also have the ability to look beyond the present and to come up with out-of-the-box solutions that are fit for the future. Therefore, artists and creatives need our support with as little restrictions as possible to set this boundless creative power free. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end with a quote of one of my favorite writers, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she says, "Culture does not make people, people make culture." So today's session will give you the opportunity to hear the experiences of a number of young artists from the African continent who will share glimpses of their work with us. I hope you will be inspired. I'm very happy to now give back the floor to Marcus Desando, the Prins Klaus Fund's new director, who will host this discussion. Thanks a lot, Marcus.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I see there was a little bit of confusion with the slides, but I hope that it will all be now in order. I think if you can go back to, you're in the right slide now, Laura. So I wanted to first, before we get into the introduction of the artists and also to our featured guest today, I thought I would give you a bit of a history on the Prins Klaus and Fund, and tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do as an organization. So I wanted to start with His Royal Highness Prince Klaus's one of his quotes, because of course we know he had a lot of quotes, but this is one of the, for me, I feel quite important for us to start this afternoon with. Development cannot simply be dismissed as striving for an increase in national income. Real development then presupposes also, in addition to economic growth, a strong social policy that leads to change and improvement in many sectors. Development is a total process. You can go to the next slide, thank you. So a little bit of a background on the fund. Prince Klaus had a great appreciation of different cultures and a deep belief that culture and development were inextricably linked. On his 70th birthday, 6th of September 1966, the Dutch Parliament presented Prince Klaus with a gift, a fund of culture and development. In its first 25 years, the Prince Klaus Fund supported cultural exchanges, awarded excellent artists and cultural organizations, and rescued cultural sites and artifacts threatened with destruction. Our mission as an organization is to support, next slide please, Laura, to support and connect and honor artists and cultural practitioners in areas where cultural expression is under pressure, This is mainly in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and of course, the Caribbean. Our vision as the fund is strive for a world where cultural expression is free and valued. Next slide. Our new strategy is built on the lessons we have learned on how we can best leverage our expertise, our network and reputation to achieve the biggest possible impact on the people we support and on the societal changes they address. Next slide. So we are focused as an organization on people. They have to be extraordinary people. They have to have creative ideas, drive change, lead organizations, and inspire others. As of 2021, we focus specifically on those individuals in the international cultural field who are the drivers of societal change. We recognize and support the achievements of young and emerging talent at crucial stages of their career to boost their professional development, to enable them to create new perspectives, engage with societal changes, and to help them in their way to grow into new role models, hereby maximizing societal transformation through culture. Next slide, please. So this next slide is a little bit of an illustration on the journey that we take with the different cultural practitioners. We start with the exploration stage, where they are just beginning in their careers. They are very exploratory. They are very experimenting in the work they do, and they are willing to learn. Then we have the confidence stage, where they are a bit more focused of their work. They are taking a lot of action in terms of what they want to do. They're engaged, they motivate, they gather in knowledge, and more importantly, they really strive to make impact. And then, of course, the role model stage, which characterizes itself with protect legacy. They have to look at continuation as one of their focuses. They need to be able to want to give back. And more than that, they need to be able to take leadership. So thank you. These three stages are characterized by 3 awards that I want to then talk to you a little bit about. Next slide, please go on. So for the first time, 100 seed awards of 5,000 euros were given to emerging cultural practitioners and young talents to boost their societally engaged cultural practice. By recognizing emerging talents with the Prince Klaus Seed Award, we aim to provide room for experimentation, to develop new perspectives of societal challenges within their practice. The final selection was made with the advice of 15 expert external advisors from our working countries who focused on artistic quality and the potential impact of the awards. Diversity of gender, discipline, people, and geographies was also kept in consideration to ensure a balanced selection and the prioritization of marginalized voices. So the final selection of 2021 SEED awardees consisted of 100 participants from 65 countries. Of these, the selection included 42 women, 44 men, 13 non-binary individuals, and 1 artist who chose not to disclose their gender. Next slide, please. The next is the Mentorship Awards, where 35 practitioners from various disciplines were recognized with the Prince Klaus Mentorship Award through 3 thematic mentorship award programs, engaging with societal challenges, and focused on learning and experimentation. These are collaborations with partner organizations like the Goethe Institute, Creative Industries Fund, so I apologize, and the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture. As part of our mentorship, we would like to highlight a program called Building Beyond that focuses on a range of African contexts. In this interactive and collaborative program, we invited designers, creatives, thinkers to reimagine the future of their cities and communities through spatial thinking and creative problem solving. So it's really going to be quite exciting what they come up with. The next slide, please. Thank you. And the third is our Impact Awards, which are awarded biannually to 6 change makers whose work addresses societal challenges in innovative and powerful ways. The Prince Klaus Impact Award is intended to give a final boost to the careers of recipients who have a great potential to become role models, who will inspire others to follow in their footsteps in transforming their context through culture. Nominations were requested from 328 experts from the international field of culture and development. This process resulted in 97 eligible nominations from 44 countries. The received nominations were roughly gender balanced, with 41% female, 52% male, and 7% non-binary. We will be revealing the results of the Impact Awards later on in the year. I would like to invite you to please visit our website for more details on the 25-year celebration that was presented virtually last year in December, where you will be able to see firsthand the impact of the work that the fund does. Now, I would like to introduce you to our first guest, and her name is Tessa Bahanna. So you can go to the next slide, please. And I also would like to ask Laura, if as I'm reading out her bio, to please go in one slide to the next. Tessa is a director of 30 Degrees East Ugandan Arts Trust, who are a network partner of the Prince Klaus Fund and received longer-term support. 32 Degrees East is a not-for-profit that promotes the creation and exploration of contemporary art in Uganda. As director, she has supported the development and execution of projects such as the Kele Arts Lab for research and critical thinking through public practice, the third and the fourth edition of Kele Art, Kampala Public Arts Festival, and residency exchanges with partners such as the Art Collaboratory and Triangle Network. She's currently overseeing 32 Degree East Capital Project, raising funds to build the first purpose-built art center in Kampala. With an academic background in sociology and anthropology, she is particularly interested in the intersection between arts and Ugandan society, and how arts environments should be protected and nurtured. Before her directorship at 32 Degrees East, she was on the inaugural organization committee for Nyege Nyege International Music Festival and worked on communications and external relations for educational nonprofit in Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, and South Africa. I'm going to hand over to you, Tessa.
Thank you so much for that, Marcus. And Laurent, maybe you could just go back to the beginning of my portion, and then I'll reveal the rest of the slides as I speak. Thank you again to Marcus and to the Prince Klaus Fund team, to Ambassador van der Verde. This is just a really amazing opportunity to get to share about our work and to get to talk about a topic that is very near and dear, I think, to many a cultural practitioner's heart, not because we want it to be, but just because of the nature of the work we do and the desire to keep doing it, and that is unrestricted funding. So as Marcus shared, 32 Degrees East is a center for the creation and exploration of contemporary art. We are based in Kampala in Uganda, the capital city, and we've been around for 10 years now. And really, I believe the reason we are still here and have been able to work with hundreds of artists from all over the world, been able to host residencies, facilitate exchanges, have our public art festival, workshops, dialogue series, exchanges, and more is because of unrestricted funding. And as I was thinking about this amazing prompt about, what is the transformative power of unrestricted support towards cultural freedom, the first thing that it made me think about is how we work with our artists. So we are an artist-centered organization, and one of the greatest things we do is Kla Arts, which is our public arts festival. Kla is taken from Kampala, which is our capital, so it's a shorthand for that. And throughout the festival, we really put a lot of emphasis on process and on experimentation. This is both through the festival and through the residencies that we host. Our residencies typically will last about 3 months, and in the residency, an artist is given studio space to really get outside of their comfort zone, to try something new, to research something deeper, basically something that they've never had the time and the space for, and the resources in terms of finances. So for each residency, we give artists the same materials budget and a per diem trusting that each artist has their own approach. And each artist knows best how to spend that money and what they want to do in their residency. We trust that each artist knows the importance and the value of the residency for their own lives and careers, and that they will therefore be able to make use of the resources accordingly. Next slide, please. For Klaus Arts, which is the festival, and that's one of the images from it, artists have the unique opportunity to create work for an audience that typically doesn't get to experience visual arts, which is weird because Kampala is a very lively city. It's very dynamic. If you've been here, if you've enjoyed our music, our festivals, our theater shows, but when it comes to visual arts, you really rarely get to see it on our streets, which probably speaks to how contested public space is in Kampala and in Uganda. So Klaus art becomes really important because it takes art outside of traditional art spaces and right into the city, to new audiences who maybe would never step foot in a gallery, may not even know that galleries are a thing. And so what that means is it really opens up the avenues of creation for an artist. You know, what different things might they speak about with this new audience that they wouldn't speak to a collector about at an art fair? What alternative materials might they be using that they traditionally would think, you know, won't have a real resale value? What materials might they use that speak to an audience, member of the audience who deals with tailoring and material and can suddenly relate to the work that they're seeing? What spaces are they using that can better translate their work? And how might all of that surprise us and surprise themselves as an artist? So that whole, sorry, next slide. That process and that experimentation in both the festival and the residency and other programs, it really transforms us as an organization as well. It transforms what we're able to do. So, I mean, the festival last year was years in the making, not just because of COVID, but because we had the unrestricted funding to dream big and to be ambitious. For this festival, we actually spent a lot of time learning from previous editions of Klaus Arts. This was the 4th edition, and so we had 3 editions to learn from. And we had public art workshops and conversations with artists, and had, you know, time, space, and finances to actually design something that I believe was wild and wonderful, not just in terms of the festival, but in the lead up to the festival. So we actually designed Klaus Art Labs, which is a workshop intensive that actually involved way more participants than we originally had imagined because we were able to experiment. Next slide, please. So with Klaus Art Labs, we had a series of 3 intensive workshops, and we also hosted international residencies. So we were able to facilitate experiences for artists to travel to Mali, to Kyrgyzstan, to Indonesia, to Egypt, and more, about 6 different countries, basically because we had funding and we said, you know what, let's try it. This is something that could be really great, that we think would be really transformative for artists because we have a relationship with them and they've told us that this is something that they want to explore. And we know the resources we have in terms of these networks, so we can use what we have to actually meet their needs rather than designing something completely devoid of that. And it's through the workshops that Katesi found transformative ways to talk about the climate crisis through her sculpture. So that green sculptural work that you saw coming from the building was really her way of talking about how nature will eventually take over these artificial buildings that we've constructed. It was through the residencies that Charity Atukunda, in that first slide, was inspired by West African festivals to use costume and choreography in her work, whereas usually she's a digital illustrator. In this slide and the next slide that you can go to, you see that Alison Nadunga, who traditionally uses origami and is this brilliant multidisciplinary artist who talks about how mathematical ratios involved bring out folding patterns, and we were able to host this event with young kids who had been out of school for 2 years due to COVID, so it became this wider experience. This was also inspired by her time in residency in Indonesia and the different patterns and prints that she was experiencing. So really, when artists have experiences like this that stretch them in new ways and unveil new insights, it's not just about the artists. We as an organization are so much better for it because we're also both invested in the same things. They're not just beneficiaries of our resources. We get to fulfill our mission because of them. And we don't always get things right, but together from our different angles, the artists with their work and us working with them and co-creating and collaborating from our different angles, we're able to impact our corners of the world. I'm hoping that you can kind of see the point that I'm getting at, that this same relationship and way of working is how things can and should be, not just between artists and arts organizations, but between arts organizations and funders. Because many of us operate in spaces with minimal arts infrastructure. In Uganda specifically, there's basically none. Not only is there not much funding for the arts from the government, there's also a lot of repression that often we have to deal with. Freedom of expression can lead to imprisonment and torture. And so you can imagine the power that a funder has in an environment like this one. And I think that really can't be understated. And so if as a funder you decide, you'd want to fund a residency on NFTs, and, as an organization, it's not really something we're interested in, but we can't find funding for it, then guess what? We might be hosting a residency on NFTs, right? That is the kind of power that a funder has. And often we as organizations have to then move from one temporary program to the next, one new temporary program to another new temporary program, often at the whim of a funder's priority, which might be because of funding strategies. It might be because of a new person in the office who really is passionate about one topic and totally can disregard the years of experience that we've had, the time and relationships we've had with artists that we work with, and what we see are the greatest needs in our context. So that means also that our time and our labor and other resources shift from one thing to the next too, just so we might get that, little 10% of admin fee from that project budget. And it's a shame because with unrestricted funding, you realize the power that it has to give you space to try new things, to give you space and time to learn from past projects, to learn from experimentation, to learn from how you failed, to then go into the next journey with that knowledge and not dive into new projects without all of the space and time that unrestricted funding frees you up to have. And we need to be able to invest in ourselves and in our own futures. Next slide. After years of renting, we are currently in the process of constructing our very first permanent home for artists, and are completely over the moon about it because it's also been a journey. The center, it will host artist studios, a gallery, workspace, accommodation. It's going to be built with this beautiful ecological design using earth materials, so completely earth construction, stone, use of natural materials, so also thinking about our sustainable footprint. And it's been ineligible for most traditional forms of funding. No one wants to fund capital projects. The number of times that I've scored through pages and pages of applications to see if we're eligible and then read no infrastructure or capital project, I could write a book. So it happens constantly. And yet, when you think about all of the things that we want to see in the world, next slide, this is the process of years of conversations with artists and writers and other members of our cultural ecosystem. It's really thinking about what artists need, thinking about how we accommodate more artists, build better facilities and opportunities, connect wider audiences to their work, and all the things funders tell us are really important, like having diverse revenue streams so that we're not so reliant on funding. So we, are really thinking about how to have that built in so that we're more financially sustainable and have more freedom to choose which projects to take up and which to say no to. So next slide. We're building a space to create, to connect, to share, to grow. It's in process, but it's taken 6 years to get here, and really finding funders who have taken a leap of faith and said, we see the work that you're doing. We see your reputation. We've heard from artists that you work with. We understand the context, but we also understand that you know your context well, and you see the need for it. And we believe in the same things you do, and we want the same things. Next slide, please. So with all of that, that is the vision, and it is in process, and it's still something that we're fundraising for just because of the realities of the funding streams that we operate in. And yet, I'm so thankful to get to share with you that when funding is unrestricted, potential is unleashed. And again, we have years of understanding and questioning and building a process that allows us to be able to dream in this way. I believe that what we do, and you funding what we do, isn't just for us as an organization. It makes our world better. It fulfills not just our mission and vision, but the mission and vision of the Prince Klaus Funds, of the Sigrid Rousing Trust, of us Collaboratory and Dune Foundation. It's for a world that is more free, more just, and more beautiful. So why would you want to restrict that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tessa. Thank you. It's really quite inspirational. I think there was quite a number of points that I picked up from what you were saying that I really would like to, at the end of the presentations of the artists, highlight them again for our audiences and for everyone. Really, I think they're really quite important ones that really support the idea of unrestricted funding. I would like to then introduce our first of our featured artists, and he is a young man from Egypt. His name is Mohammed Mahdy. And Mohammed is an Arab documentary photography program grantee, our joint venture with the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture and in partnership with the Magnum Foundation. You can go to the next picture from yes. From 2017, he set out to document the experiences of residents in Wadi El Kamar, a community near Alexandria that is badly affected by the pollution of a cement factory. Next slide, please. His series of photographs entitled Moon Dust tells the story of people whose health is permanently damaged by constant, all-pervasive dust from the factory. Next slide. Previous efforts to pressure the cement company failed, but after Mahdy's project was exhibited in Cairo and later in New York, national and international attention brought some results. Next slide. The company installed filters to limit their pollution, and the health minister promised help with medical costs for the worst affected. This was, however, not sufficient to put an end to the problems. The photo series was turned into a film as part of the online exhibition Take Me to the River, which grew out of the Prince Klaus Fund's collaboration with the Goethe Institute on the program called Cultural and Artistic Responses to Environmental Change. Can I ask you to play the video, please?
بناكل اسمنت، بنشرب اسمنت، بننام على اسمنت.
ده صدر واحد مدخن، صدر واحد بيشرب شيشه، اكنه من صدر طفل.
هو لو الله يرحمه لو يعرف ان الكلام دوت هيبقى قدامنا كده ما كانش حط فلوسه في ارض تعتبر تربه لينا.
It's a very short film, but I will give Mohammed a little bit of time to really talk a lot more about the work and all that he did. And so thank you very much, Mohammed, and thank you for coming. I want to introduce our next artist, which is Samwel. Please go to Samwel's slides. In his own words, Samwel introduces himself as saying, and I think this is quite important, I ran away from home between the ages of 6 and 8 as a result of child abuse. I lived as a street child in different parts of Tanzania for over 10 years. In 2009, I joined Makini, a Tanzanian nonprofit organization that supports children and young people living in the streets. There first, I began to train and perform in traditional dance, modern dance, and theater. This was the beginning of my artistic journey, but my background and experiences continue to influence my work to this day. Samwel Japhet is a Tanzanian dancer and movement artist using dance and performance as artistic expression for storytelling. In his works, he reflects on social issues and human experiences, creating a space for reflection, awareness, and discussion. He graduated with a diploma in contemporary and Tanzanian traditional dance from the Muda Africa Dance School in Tanzania. Samwel co-founded a Tanzanian-based nonprofit dance company, Nantea Dance Company, where he has been co-creating a biannual contemporary dance night event in Dar es Salaam as a platform for young Tanzanians and African dance artists. Currently, he is a manager of the Umoja, a project by a pioneering network of Tanzanian and European cultural institutes, academia, and government bodies dedicated to promoting social and cultural cohesion through the arts in Tanzania. Umoja is one of the 11 pilot projects selected for implementation in 2022 by European Union National Institutes for Culture through the initiative European Spaces of Culture. His work has been presented in quite a number of countries, including the Netherlands, France, South Africa, Burkina Faso, and a lot other more countries. Mr. Japhet is a 2021 Prince Klaus Seed Award recipient. You can please play his video.
Nilipokuwa na umri wa miaka 6, nilitoroka nyumbani. Kutokana na matatizo ya kifamilia, nikaamua kwenda mbali nisiwe na mahusiano na wazazi wangu wala familia yangu. Nayajua maisha mtaani zaidi ya ninavyojijua mimi mwenyewe. Nilijiunga na makundi mengi ya mitaani ikiwemo ya vibaka na kufanya wizi wa vifaa vya magari. Katika maisha unapaswa kufanya maamuzi mapya. Mimi nikachagua sanaa endaniwa Mungu. Sanaa imenipa nafasi mpya ya kuyaona maisha kwa mtazamo tofauti. Natumia dansi kuelimisha, kuburudisha na kuelezea mawazo na hisia zangu na kuonyesha matatizo mbalimbali yaliyopo katika jamii. Ninapokuwa nacheza najihisi huru na salama. Ninaisubiria siku nitakayorudi nyumbani kwa wazazi na familia yangu, kuonesha kijana niliyekuwa hivi sasa.
Willow Smith. She's a South African storyteller, passionate about the media advocacy working across Africa. We can go, I think, to about 2 slides on, please. Thank you. Yes, and you can also play some of her pictures as we read her. Her love for photography developed at the Market Photo Workshop, which led to a deeper ethnographic inquiry in visual anthropology and exploring African studies in Oxford. Sydelle's artistic approach is influenced by memory, identity, and the after effects of colonialism from a lived experience. Next slide, please. For the last 6 years, she has been working on a multimedia Unsettled, exploring the project called Unsettled, exploring whiteness and settler colonial histories in South Africa, and soon America as an Atlantic Fellow for Racial Equality. Next slide. Passionate about the audience engagement and African cinema distribution, along with her husband, filmmaker Rowan Bypass, she co-founded Sunshine Cinema, Africa's first solar-powered cinema network run by young people using the power of storytelling to spark conversations and drive social change. I think we can get ready to play the video of Sydelle. The Prince Claus Fund supported the Sunshine Cinema project. You can go to the video.
In the past, we had very few African-made movies. In fact, maybe there was a moment in time where we had none. We had nothing that really portrayed our culture, our values. So these African-made movies, they portray what we are, what we believe in. They portray our strength as Africans. They define us. The Sandbox can work in Malawi because most of the films that we will be showing were made in Malawi. I so much enjoy working with the communities. So this is my chance, like, to go out to the communities, do what I do with them, and the excitement, the fun that is in watching a cinema, watching a movie together with that great audience. It's so much fun. Trust me, when you see the excitement in their faces, when they're cheering for something, for a certain scene or something. It gives me satisfaction. So it's like we are bringing back the films to the people who participated. At the same time, we are trying to encourage them that whatever it is that they are doing has been recognized, and at the same time, it will educate others too. After the film, that's where we start having a conversation with my audience. It's very important for me to forget about my point of view and focus on my audience, what they think about the movie, what they think the movie will have, the impact the movie will have on them, the change that they think the movie will bring to the community. So I want to hear it from them. That's why I'll ask questions, make sure that there is that conversation. I hear from them, I record whatever it is that they're saying, and make sure that there should be that change that they are so much anticipating. Change is very, very difficult. Not everybody accepts it, but then I do what I do because I know that I am bringing them hope. Because I know that somewhere, somehow, it will trigger something in that person's mind. And they might not change now, because change might take time. It doesn't just happen over a sudden. It might take years, but I know that I have planted a seed that someday might generate. Someday that seed will grow. So I do what I do because I realize that it's just a seed. You don't expect to pluck a fruit from that seed, no, but you expect that seed to grow, turn into a tree, and then bear fruits. I am an instrument of change. Here I am carrying these films back to the communities, and my hope is that I should see the impact. Okay, by the end of maybe a month or two, what impact is there? It's about seeing that people are actually doing something about what they saw in a film. So that will make me a very, very happy Sandbox ambassador.
Thank the artists for sharing their works and for really showing us the power of what they do can really be even more amplified with the type of funding that we really would like to advocate moving forward. I realized that we've really run a little bit out of the time that we wanted to spend and have a lot of conversations. We still have some time, but I would like to maybe first invite Mohammed and each of you also, Samwel and Sydelle, to just tell us a little bit about your projects, what you're doing, where you are going, and what some of your experiences have been around funding, whether restricted or not. And if you could probably keep it to 2 minutes, I would really appreciate it. So I'll hand over to Mohammed first.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here among all of you. What I'm doing is I'm doing stories about social justice, social environment, documenting our culture in the communities that I grew up in the countries that I'm from. And I'm doing this because I'm passionate towards people, towards the life. And what I see, like, I think Marx described it and said it, like, when you present local artists, this is so important. And why is that? Because you have the sense of how to represent your community somehow. At least when you are doing your stories or your projects, you have the sense of not victimizing them or traumatizing them again. And this is, I guess, so important in this field in my career. And yeah, that's it. Like, in short, I don't want to take much time, but I'm sure like unrestricted funds, it helped us because it didn't tell you just what to do and what to focus. So it gives you a lot of, I don't know, creative thinking. You think freely. What do you need to do, how to represent your community is the way you see it, because of course you have lived there, you are here among them. And this is so powerful because, like, in my career, at least speaking in my career, when you get an assignment from an editor or an organization and it tells you like you have to do this project specifically 1 to 3, you feel like you are doing their project, not just your project. You are not who you are. You are not having a space to grow or to learn or to experiment. And this, of course, takes a lot of pressure that coming out from, I don't know, different funds or different thinking. And yeah, this is so powerful. Yes.
It is. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Mohammed. I think also you might be a man of not so many words, but you speak through the work that you do, and it's really quite powerful. So thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Can I invite Samwel to maybe say a few things about his work and where he sees himself, and also if you can respond to this concept of transformative power through unrestricted funding.
Yes. So one of my mission, or one of the things that drives me, is I want to make my work as part of my community in our daily lives, as part of the community. So one of the things I'm really striving is to be able to create platforms or creating space where there will be open discussions and open where both the community and also me as an artist, so with artists, where they can both learn and exchange with one another, and we can find a common ground where we find a solution to things that are happening or are continuing to happen within our daily lives in the community that we are in. So I would say another way of supporting arts and culture, for instance, is it gives artists a freedom also to create and really reach their community, to create work that reaches their communities, and also to be able to even to give more space for things to happen, and in unrestricted funding, it gives it even more more space, and yes, it's given it more space and aliveness, and yes, I mean that's what I could say. Mm-hmm. So the other thing which has been a really challenge is that most of the funding are only supporting temporary based projects, but it's really hard to find funding which funds like permanent structures. And one of the things that we are struggling with, for instance, in Tanzania or in other African countries, we are lack of infrastructures, you know? So I think by allowing unrestricted, with this concept of unrestricted funding, it's even giving more space for the community to have the access to arts and culture, you know, which is continuing to happen in their daily lives and in their communities, you know. So yes, that's something that I can share.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Sam. That's really, that's really true. Look, I'm not going to say that it's something that will be achieved immediately in terms of a lot of organizations, because there's a lot of mandates that people have to follow, but we have to try and find a middle ground somewhere. And I think some of your points are really quite valid and quite similar points to what Tessa was saying earlier on that I picked up. So I'm really quite excited that there's some kind of one voice that's going around in terms of unrestricted funding. So I'm going to invite Sydelle now. And Sydelle, I remember when we were having a bit of a discussion before this, you challenged us that what is transformative? What is a transformative power? And so I really would like for you to, after you've really maybe told us a little bit about what you do and where your aspirations are, and maybe expand a little bit more on that challenge, on what you mentioned last week.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and it's a great pleasure to be here with everybody today. For us, unrestricted funding has always been a challenge as we grew the idea of Sunshine Cinema from 10 years ago to where it is today. We have a network of over 30 young people running solar-powered mobile cinemas for us in South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi on a variety of different projects, showcasing African films, hosting conversations, producing podcasts, doing a lot of community engagement work that is aimed at sparking conversation around jobs, gender justice, government accountability. And in a place like South Africa, where over 35% of the population is unemployed and young people do not have access to diverse content because they can't afford to get online, we feel that bringing this kind of storytelling into people's spaces, into their communities, bringing it back to where it comes from originally is a powerful tool. And a lot of the time we have faced what Tessa mentioned before, where you have to shift and shape and adapt your approach because of funders' requirements. So unrestricted funding is so powerful, and it was so great that Prince Klaus joined us early on as we were developing the Sandbox Ambassadorship Network, because it gave us the space to experiment and to learn and to fail and to do better. So if more funders were able to do that and trust projects more, I think we would have a lot more powerful examples of creative expression that really speak to local issues and local needs, instead of always having to adapt and shift according to what is the fancy sustainable development goal that needs to be focused on that quarter. So unrestricted funding is a powerful space to expand, and that's what we've been able to do with our Sandbox Ambassadorship Network.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Look, I think Sydelle, the challenge with, I think it's Samwel also mentioned it earlier on around the idea of unrestricted funding allows people to do things that a lot of funders don't necessarily fund for, like building a structure or buying equipment, or which are sometimes really quite needed. But there's also another aspect of this where unrestricted funding can also lead to abuse of grant that are received by beneficiaries. How do you, and this is a question really for anyone, but how do you think that there could be a middle ground in total unrestricted funding, but also one that prevents individuals from abusing it? Because I think that really goes back to what you were saying, Sydelle, about transformative power is not really being achieved because it does have to be, it has to be in some way or the other controlled, right?
I think there has to be a balance, and I do appreciate the accountability measures that are in place for nonprofits in South Africa, for example, where you have to have a certain level of a certain number of years of audited financial statements in order to qualify for funding. You have to have gone through that rigmarole and those processes to make sure that you have built that trust and accountability to be able to manage money that is meant to be going to beneficiaries and too often has been misspent. So of course there need to be measures in place around that unrestricted funding and how it is used. But I do feel that there isn't enough unrestricted funding that supports things like building of spaces, covering operational costs. A lot of the time funders, it's almost like they expect that you're just magically going to be able to afford an office and internet and all of the things that you need to do your work. Because most of the funding is only for project-based funding. So perhaps it's a middle ground there with mentorship and support at certain stages as you build that nonprofit to prove that you are accountable and that you have good governance structures in place.
Yeah, that's great. I think that is really quite an important. I had a question that I want to ask Samwel, but before I go to that question, Tessa, what do you think, especially since you are in a position where you have worked with a lot of artists that are then sent to other different parts of the world or doing work that sometimes that's also in a way unrestricted. How do you manage the idea of control without abuse?
I think first, definitely not thinking about it as control. I think relationship is really important. It's relationship and community. These are people who we know where they live. For some of them, we know their relatives and have watched them grow over the years as well. And so I think that relationship is also possible between organizations and funders. Come and see our spaces, come often, have calls with us, open things up so that when we run into issues, we can call you and say, this is happening at the moment. I'm not sure how to handle it. Do you have advice? What's within your network that you can help? If we aren't great on monitoring and evaluation, is that something you could put resources towards, right? I think it's opening up those channels of communication and trust that then help accountability too.
Yeah, that really leads very much into the question that I wanted to ask Samwel, because I think one of the really pertinent issues we need to always talk about is that how much do grant makers understand the work that is done by individuals on the ground, right? And look, there's not a lot of us to be able to have the resources to go and understand every part of the world. But Samwel, what would you say is needed by young artists to create an impact in their own communities and especially towards social change that would make our viewers that have joined us today and also grant makers in understanding some of the needs? I think you're muted.
I think one of the biggest needs, even me as a young artist, is that the lack of space where artists can go and learn, and also like watering up their creative and the thing that they want to deliver in their communities. I think the lack of these spaces, they make then you don't see so many artists. You don't really hear voices of many artists. The ones that are being heard are the ones which already have exposure, I can say, or the ones which have are in these certain spaces. So what about the ones who like they don't have like spaces, for instance, to learn or to go, because an art space, for instance, is a home for an artist, So the lack of these spaces, they make the voice unheard, I can say. So I think, so one of the things that are needed, in my point of view, is the spaces where artists feel at home, where they feel they can create freely, and where they can really nurturing themselves, and they can really like bring change in their communities, So I think that's one of the biggest thing. It's a need. And I think one of the thing I would say, because I think Tessa mentioned that, funders have a really strong, have a big power, I can say, in a sense, also like in influencing like the local governments, for instance, in these countries where arts is not being is not being supported, for instance in Tanzania, that if these, the international funders can help to build not infrastructure, but infrastructure within the government, like to create such like a tradition where this government, they can give support to arts and culture. This is, it's somehow, for me, it's a sustainable way, instead of just giving funds to temporary projects. These at the end of after 2 or 3 years, then nothing it will go on. But if this fund, supports also like the governments in creating, programs of funding for arts and culture in their local communities, this somehow is sustainable, because it's affecting the community, and it's coming from the government, from the public,
Fantastic. So, no, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sam. That is really quite important. Look, it's a difficult one. I don't think it's an easy one to really navigate around how to start engaging governments in different areas. But it leads me to my question to Mohammed that I've been very curious about in terms of the work that you've done. How has you working on the film and the photography exhibition has really started engaging your government in ways that, also in different departments that you think it would be the cultural department, but it's actually the health department that got involved. Did it somehow make it easy for you to speak to even your cultural divisions in government?
You mean like the work made it easy, or the fund?
Did it make it easy? Did it not make it? Obviously we know that the fund made it possible, but did it make it easy for you to engage with your government around even cultural issues?
Yeah, of course. Like if I'm speaking from my things that I'm doing is visual storytelling, and it's a very powerful tool, because like it travels so fast in media, through social media and the whole world, and you never know who will look at it and decide to make a move. So you find a lot of people is contacting you about this. And from my little experience, most of the time, people just do not know, they get surprised sometimes when you show them something in their community or the same country. And like, of course, like for me, arts and culture, what we are doing is a way to gather like people together, because it opens a lot of conversation and amplify the people's voice. At least like you make a statement and tell people, hey, look what's happening here. And for me, this is important also because I don't know, like with funds, and when especially it made with the local artist and local resident, it's not the project that is coming out, it's not a stereotype of the place you live in, or it's not a stereotype of Africa where there is just like poor and people trying to survive. No, it's more than that. And of course, when it's done by you like ethically or with authenticity, and you represent your own community, people believe in you and believe in what you are doing. And this also, as I said like before, like this, because you have a sense of not re-victimizing or re-traumatizing people again. And again, you never know what's gonna happen. It's just like no one do anything alone. So together, I feel it's more powerful, like because I don't know, wherever you get a fund, you start to collaborate with people, someone reaches you and you start to work together if you believe in something. And things started to sort and it's happening at the end.
Fantastic. I think we've run out of time. But before we go, we could have really carried on for much longer with this conversation. So thank you all so much. Before we actually go away, I want to remind everyone some of the really wonderful points that came out of this, that unrestricted funding creates freedom For individuals, it allows them to dream big, which is really quite important. It opens the world for creatives because then they can do more than just the structured amount of allowed work by the different funders. It allows artists to learn from their mistakes because then they don't have to be so careful about things, which is important. And also, which I found very powerful, is that it opens opportunities for them to play and learn from play, because then that's how you really create what you do. I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dutch of the Netherlands for giving us this opportunity to really represent the work that they do, and for us as the Prince Klaus Fund to have this conversation. I hope we can really extend it further than today. I want to thank my guests, Tessa Bahanna, Samwel. I want to thank Sydelle and also Mohammed, and definitely Devi for being part of this as well. Thank you all very much, everyone that joined us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the week and the different conferences and conversations that I have happening in the week. And with that, I say goodbye. Thank you very much.